Hi everybody and welcome back to the Renewables podcast. Thank you ever so much for coming back. If you don't already follow the podcast, then head over to Spotify or YouTube, depending if you like to watch us or listen to us, and hit us a follow on there. We'd much appreciate it, and you get a direct update on when a new episode is out. If you do have a little bit of money spare that you want to contribute to the podcast, then why not head over and subscribe to our paid part of the channel as well. The last bit of admin as well is also that we are attending Installer Show, which is the 23rd to 25th of June. And we're going to be there speaking to everybody. And we're also going to be doing some exciting stuff, having some larger debates as well. So really looking forward to being there. And thank you very much for Installer Show for providing us that space to do that again. Okay, housekeeping done, Mark. How are you doing?
You do a much better job of introducing the podcast than I do. I forget everything at the beginning. Just say how you're doing, Sam, and get on with it. So top marks on that one.
I was just checking the dates there for installation. Yeah, 23rd, 25th.
So yeah, no, I'm good. I'm good. It's been some nice weather the last couple of days. I managed to get a couple of days out. I do have this weird condition called polymorphic light eruption. So every time spring hits, I get these weird rashes all over my skin, which has been flaring up. I usually get it on a roof. I'm really cautious. I'm covered to head to toe in sunscreen and hats and sat in the back garden a bit too long yesterday and the day before. And I was scratching away when I gone out to Pizza Express with Laura last night. I said, what are you itching for? I was like, it's this polymorphic light eruption. So, just stop scratching yourself. Just like, it's not the ideal condition. It's one of the things that is like a really irrelevant illness in the grand scheme of things, but it's also very annoying. But yeah, that's me in a nutshell. How are you doing?
I'm all right. Yeah, we've just done an episode before this, haven't we? So I've got into the swing of things. It's a little while since we've done one of these sit down episodes, isn't it? Really, because the last episode that we filmed, apart from today, was in the van, and I really enjoyed that one. I thought it was nice, and it was a different environment, and we were heading down to do some working on our respective businesses with a load of other electricians that were also there to do that. And I don't know, it just felt really nice to be going there to do something to work on the business rather than putting out the fires within it half the time. So yeah, that was really cool. But yeah, I'm all good, ready to have a good chat about some happenings and some goings on in the world of renewables.
Yeah, absolutely. That van episode went down really well as well. I think the audience quite liked that one as well. It was a bit more relaxed. Maybe we felt less on camera while we were sat in the van. I know you were struggling with illness at that point as well, so you probably weren't feeling it through the recording, but it's gone down an absolute storm as that one. So we should maybe revisit some van chats in the future. But yeah, the solar coaster, I think, is the kind of fundamental topic of this one, isn't it? And I think we're all seeing elements of that. We've alluded to it in other podcasts we've recorded, but there's definitely a big upward surge.
Yeah, there is, and this is how the renewables world goes. I think I've described it on my Instagram today as I've got in the carriage, the bar has come down, and I'm ready for the next little incline or decline, whatever's over the hill next, because obviously there's many things that can contribute to the solar coaster, and that can be government stimulus, which we're going to talk about. It can be world events, which we'll probably talk about, and it can also be around products that come out or products that leave the market, as we've just recorded an episode about the whole give energy side of things. So the solar coaster can be positive and negative at the same time. Both can be true, but we're definitely on an upward trajectory at the minute in terms of leads and in terms of appetite. And the one glaring thing that also makes a difference is weather. As well, we're entering the brighter part of the year where people are actually looking at what's happening in the world and worrying a little bit about their energy pricing and how to protect their family and their bills. And suddenly that 10 grand, 20 grand, 15 grand, 100 grand, whatever they've got in their bank suddenly looks a little bit more appetizing to put towards something to protect their families and their businesses or whatever from some of these price shocks. Because if you're 100% exposed to the grid, then you're 100% exposed to whatever they want to charge you to a degree. So we're having a lot more of those conversations now, but I don't know how you find it, Mark. You might be a completely cold-hearted businessman, but it is one of them where I always find it hard talking about the whole Iran thing, as I did with the whole Ukraine thing. I still managed to kind of weave it into having a conversation with a customer, but I don't know. I don't know if we're American, it would be easy to talk about it. But I think when we're British, we're kind of a little bit like, we don't really want to be seen to use the Iran war to sell equipment, but equally we're selling more equipment because of the Iran war anyway. So yeah, for me, I'm like, I always struggle a little bit as to not to try and not try and use it as leverage, but just to kind of mention that this sort of thing, when this sort of things happen, it does directly impact us, probably more than it has America in terms of our energy pricing.
Yeah, absolutely, it does, doesn't it? I mean, the vehicle side of things, cost of diesel in our business has gone through the roof as a course of this, and we're seeing predictions around energy costs for homes and businesses going up as well, and that all traces back to the war in Iran and the blocking of the Strait of Hormuz, however you say that. And this is all thousands of miles away from where we live, and it's not really impacting our daily lives other than seeing the pounds and pence behind it all, and the trauma and stuff that is actually going on in those countries is awful. So we would all like to see that draw to a close, but the cost side of those things can be a big part in what drives our industry. We see a lot of consumer demand build from that. It is an analysis around costs. And we're certainly seeing that in our business. And I think Octopus had some data that they shared with the sector and Eon as well that I'd seen the other day, where they've said their inquiries and conversions for solar's up like 30% since the Iran war started. The same with their heat pumps. And I think they've got a promise at the minute where 10 days from inquiry, they can have a heat pump installed for some consumers or something. So they're obviously putting some leverage behind their installation team as well to really crack on with this while that thirst and want for the kit is there. Because you said the solar coaster is so reactive to what's going on out in the world. It is really hard to base a business strategy around that. So speaking myself as a really small micro business owner, it must be even more challenging for some of these big behemoths out there who've got huge installation companies. And it's not like the world of cars where you can be pretty consistent knowing that when the new registration plates land in March or September, whenever it is, we're going to see a spike because people want the new regs on their cars. That's always been the way that industry's worked. And they've got that decades-long experience of knowing that. With the solar sector being so immature as it is anyway, and the fact that it is so fluid in the way that it's affected by new products, global events, government stimulus, and all that stuff, it is really, really challenging. And I don't really have any conversations with any of our customers around kind of the things that have led them towards wanting to get this stuff towards influencing them, I guess. But lots of them do mention that they are really concerned about their energy costs, and they've seen the forecasts for the pricing going up, and they want to be resistant to that, and they're looking at the payback periods around the tariffs that are available to them now. So there is some financial decisions around that, and that has been unlocked to more customers due to the warm homes thing that I'm sure we'll get onto later on in this chat. So I'm the same as you. I don't want to drive my business forward on the back of a war, basically. And like you say, I'm sure there's adverts for solar panels in America at the minute of like build your bunker under your house kind of thing going on. There's all kinds of stuff, isn't there? We're a bit more reserved over here. Yeah,
absolutely. And I've just been working on getting up a little diagram to remind me some of the stuff that I wanted to talk about here. But yeah, I mean, I've been around this space for a little while, and so and same with you with Ukraine side of things. You saw it for that, but I've seen it through the feed-in tariff. I've seen there's just these peaks and troughs, and I think if people think it's busy now, even if the whole Iran thing ends, I don't know how it's going to be finished in terms of, I don't think we're going to be back to how it was for a hell of a long time. Even with a change of administration in America, I think Iran has shown how they can really squeeze the world to get what they want. And so, if they find that, this war ends and Trump claims victory, and they go, well, you're not claiming victory because we're just going to still strangle the Strait of Hormuz, and you're kind of like, well, it's Europe that really struggles with this. And there's another kind of strait, if you like, or another entry point, which is Bab el. I had to get it up because I couldn't pronounce it, but it was Bab el Mandab, which is basically, I've probably murdered that, but that's another strait that's basically just between just near Yemen, where they reckon that if America puts ground troops in, that proxies for Iran will then shut that as well, which is basically the route that the majority of a lot of equipment and oil and everything gets to Europe. So annoyingly, we're going to be even more like if something does happen or they just decide they want to do it, suddenly we could be even under even more pressure when to America it doesn't directly affect them because they probably have companies that use that second kind of entry point, but it's one of them where it affects Europe a lot more, and a lot of the oil and products and everything that we've been receiving over the past few months have been sent ages ago, and they've been travelling around the Horn of Africa because of this whole thing kicking off anyway, and a lot of them have de-risked by just going, well, it's going to take us an extra month to get around the Horn of Africa to get to Europe. But there's still been a lot of companies and a lot of tankers and that using that second entry point into Europe, and it adds so much time having to go around Africa that as soon as some of these waterways get squeezed, then prices go up and insurance costs for these companies go up. All these sort of things just go up and up and up. And so if we think it's expensive now, or it's going to be expensive now, it's going to get a lot worse in terms of the fuel price and everything else over the next few months, because a lot of these places are still running on their old pricing, not necessarily their old pricing, but their old stocks of fuel and products that were sent well before all of this stuff kicked off. That actually all the new stuff is going to either be a lot scarcer, which drives price up, and maybe causes power outages and stuff like that. So I think we're entering a bit of over the next month or two, we're entering quite a tricky period for being able to manage this sort of stuff. And like we've just mentioned, tricky periods in terms of energy, people kind of go, well, suddenly that 15 grand that I've got in that ISA that's earning me, 3.5%, 4%, suddenly I'm like, well, actually, I'm a bit worried about how much I'm going to just get absolutely nailed for my 5, 6, 7,000 kilowatt hours of usage that I have during the year. So actually, I'm going to withdraw that and I'm going to put it into a system. And I have these arguments online, heated discussions offline with people about this whole thing. Well, how much would that earn me in the bank? How much would that money earn me in an ISA? And I'm like, well, you've got an interest rate there for that, but that money is just earning interest. It's not. There's no other benefit to that in terms of if you put that into hardware in your property, you're keeping the lights on at home. That interest ain't going to come knocking at your door saying, by the way, would you like some electricity now? Like, if you put that into hardware in your home, you're bringing your own energy into your own control to a degree. It might not be 100% in your own control. You might still have to buy a bit from the grid, but you're bringing it back into your own control. You are making sure that your property still has energy when and if there's a power cut, which can just happen without a war like this going on. But you're investing in something that shields you a little bit from this stuff happening in the future. And I think what will be happening over the next few months is companies like myself and maybe you as well, Mark, and a load of others will probably be just mentioning that to people and saying, look, this equipment is there to reduce your energy bills, but also to give you all these extra benefits. And if the grid starts struggling, like, what's one of the easiest things that they can call on? It's like all these investments that people have made to help balance the grid. So I can only see this as a positive for solar and battery. It'd be interesting to see where the pricing goes in terms of the equipment pricing goes for all of this, because a lot of this comes from China and all that, which have been really badly hit by the whole Iran side of things because of the buy something like 40% of their oil from Iran. I might get that number wrong, but it's a very high number. And so if their cost to manufacture goes up because they're having to get it from other sources, then suddenly pricing is going to go up on our side. So we've been buying. We're about to push the button, and I've hesitated because it's a lot of money, but we're about to push the button on an extremely large order of batteries, inverters, and everything, just to try and hedge against this a little bit, which is going to take a good chunk of money out of our cash flow. But you're just trying to, part of the solar coaster is trying to guess the market a little bit, and that's what's really hard to scale a business in this area, because one minute you're flying high, then suddenly you can't get any products. You've got all these jobs semi-sold. You've got people on the phone whinging at you. You've got DNOs saying, well, you've only got a week left to install this before you have to reapply to your DNO, and all these sorts of things. And that's hard to do at the best of times. But when you start worrying about stock and your own pricing because of extra business costs like fuel going up, it's a really toxic mix to try and run a successful business.
Oh, it really is. That's really the challenge of it all in the solar sector is extreme, I think, because of the way the market is so volatile. And the oil thing is an interesting one. I think we've lacked a bit of political strategy in the UK about pushing towards net zero so hard. And we have mentioned this before in wider conversation, that having that target is admirable, but there needs to be a sensible approach to it. And that time frame being condensed in the way it is has left us really exposed. I think there should still be some sort of strategy to have access to our own oil from the North Sea, if there is some in there, to at least be able to have that resource. Because, like you said, the stuff coming out of Iran is going to China and India or wherever and out into South Asia. Those markets still need oil. They're now trying to buy it from the places that we buy it. That whole market price rises as a result due to supply and demand. And the cost for us to get hold of what we could get before is rising. That's what we're seeing. And the consequence of that falls into more places than just heating and electricity. Most stuff has elements of oil in it somewhere. The kit we install will have. And like you say, you don't know how that is going to impact onto pricing for all of that stuff. But I think at a really basic level for consumers, having some sort of energy control is a really useful thing to have. I know in my own home, we get pretty regular power cuts. We had one the other day for 6 hours, and it was really nice that we weren't impacted with that. We were still able to work and function. I even thought about going to mow the front drive to wind the neighbours up at one stage. It's a nice luxury to have, but as these things develop with the grid and maybe power outages could become more of a common theme. We just don't know how this might develop in the future with global energy trade and whatnot. That is a factor. That is value beyond return on investment for me. The security of my own home and powering it for my family is a great reassurance that I have. And I know customers of mine think the same. They're looking towards this energy resilience, if you like. Certainly some of those who live in more rural places. We did one up in Berwick the other week where they had a 5-day power cut. I think I've mentioned that a couple of times on the podcast before, but he'd made a big investment because he'd been through that experience. The return on investment around the wider financials of it was still there for him, but it wasn't a factor. It really wasn't. So yeah, there is that side to things as well. And when you're looking at it in comparison to money in the bank, we've had this conversation before, you move that money from the bank into the assets you put in your home, they still hold value. They don't erase to £0 at the point they're installed. The value of your home will have risen to some degree because of that. And then you're saving on your energy bills every year with some resilience against the market fluctuations and power cuts. I think it makes a lot of sense. Quite how the Iran thing's going to play out, I think that's in the hands of a maverick over in America more than anything else. And no one can really second guess what that guy's going to do. For all intents and purposes, we'll have to wait and see. The hope is that it resolves itself and we can get back to some elements of normality and free trade around the world. But yeah, the solar coaster is on steroids at the minute because of that. But also, as you've alluded, we're in that perfect storm because it's the right time of year anyway. We do always see, or we have always seen in the 4th year now, I think we've been through the solar coaster, that spike around the end of March through April. We see a huge volume of inquiries into our business. Last year, we sold most of our installations at that point for the rest of the year. I was mindful through the Easter weekend that might be a thing, so I actually allocated some work time for myself on the Saturday and Sunday to try and deal with that. And I think we had 40 inquiries in total on that Saturday and Sunday, and I got back to every single customer on that weekend because speed is everything sometimes with that, and we've made that conscious effort, and it's paid off for us. We've converted a few already, and we've got what I would term some hot leads out of that. So I think striking while the iron's hot as a business on that solar coaster is really, really important, as much as that's impacted on my family life and the bank holiday weekend and such. I traded it off for 2 other days off, so I'm lost out overall. And that's just a strategy that we'd sort of adopted, trying to ride the solar coaster. But like you said, it's impossible. I've thought about it in my business. How can we really strategize this to be consistent in our growth and objectives, so we know that we don't need to hustle for a big bulk of work when that time frame presents in front of us, and it can just be, well, we know it's going to be there. We don't need to stress about it, and I just don't think it exists in the marketplace.
Oh, it's really tough. And before I mention go on to that, I just want to go back to something else, pick up on something else you said there about the whole return on investment side of things. And I think if you say to 99% of the population, how do you measure return on investment? They say, well, kind of what money you put in as to how long it takes you to get effectively your money back out. And what kind of dawned on me a little bit is, right, well, a return on an investment can mean something more than just money. It can be, what am I getting in return for that investment? And what you're getting in return for that investment is power cut protection, is you're getting insulation from the energy market fluctuations, which we don't need to tell anybody probably watching or listening to this that can be massively volatile, and it can, in a cruel world, it can actually mean that you are better off if the world is upside down, because your energy that you're self-using, you're self-generating, self-storing and self-using is suddenly worth double what it was a week ago because the energy price has changed, or when the next price cap comes out, kind of thing. And the opportunities probably over the next few years to trade that energy as that market really establishes as well in the UK. I think, not saying everyone will be wishing for this to happen, but people that do invest, their return is that they can actually be quite well off from the back of this. And I think we're only just scratching the surface of that at this point in time. Many people say, oh, it's only 12p now. I'm like, yeah, well, it is, but for the 24-hour one. But then you start looking at the flux ones, and you're like, some of those times are up to like 30 pence per kilowatt hour and stuff. And all this sort of stuff I think is going to become more and more common. So the return on that investment can be a lot more than just the money you get out of it. It is what is that system giving you in return? And I think even kind of a bit woolly things like peace of mind, like it's hard to put a value on that peace of mind, but knowing that you are insulated from those energy price increases, and that you are insulated from, to a degree, those power cuts, and all this other sort of stuff can actually be, in some cases, more valuable than it paying off in 7 years over 8 years. So yeah, thinking a little bit differently about what does the term return on investment actually mean, I think that would open up people to think about these systems a little bit differently. And obviously I'm biased, and I would love people to think about that because it would probably make my job easier of selling these systems. But equally, I don't think it's a lot of bull. I think there is, with systems that aren't now designed just to give you bill savings, because we've built into these things like EV chargers, we've built into these things energy trading, we've built into these things power cut protection. We have to change how we actually look at these return on investments, which are just a hangover from the feed-in tariff side of things. We can't add all this new functionality to this equipment, which bumps the cost up in relation to where the market is at the time, and suddenly use the old way of working out if that investment is worth doing. We have to adapt the way that we think about how that investment is worth doing if all this equipment has moved along as well and given us extra functionality. So yeah, I'd love for people to start adopting a bit of a different way to think about that. We'll be sat around here in in 5 years' time, and people will still be asking us, Mark, how many years will it take to pay off? Like, I don't think that's ever going anywhere, but I'd love for more and more people to be looking at this in a different way as well. But yeah, the whole solar cost thing is you just got to strap yourself in and just try and make sure you've got money in the bank. You aren't robbing Peter to pay Paul. You can pay the wages and everything. We made a very conscious effort over the last two-ish years to build up a good kind of war chest to make sure that if we didn't work we sit somewhere between 3 and 6 months. If we did not work a day in 3 to 6 months, kind of bounces around that figure depending on like we're going to do now. It's going to take us back down towards 3 months. But if nobody worked for that time, how long could we keep the lights on, keep paying everybody, keep ourselves, in terms of myself and Jess, my wife, going before we were in real trouble? And so that's where we sit. And like I say, we bounce between that 3 and 6 month time scale, depending on how much money we have to take out of the company to put it into stock and stuff like that. So doing that is, in my view, it's responsible to do, but it's it just means you've got that little bit of reassurance that everything isn't going to come crumbling down at the first sight of, stock not being available, or prices rocket, which maybe dumps the market for a little bit. So yeah, that's kind of my sort of advice on that.
There's a few companies that will be riding thin on margins, close to the wind with a lot of this, and with volume comes more risk with those things as well. So that's one thing to be cautious of. So your advice around a war chest is very well placed. I think there'll be a lot of installers out there entering this industry, and those already in it who should listen to that and action it, because it is a real risk where you can burn through money more quickly than you ever appreciate if something goes wrong whilst you are trying to scale and work at volume. We're very cautious of that in our business, which is why we're still in the realms of sort of one project a week, and we try and run good margins to kind of cover off against that. But as things fluctuate around, which it's easy to lose sight of those things. So it's an ongoing monitoring process, I suppose. And holding stock, as we've discussed before, is another risky aspect, because in one way it brings you safety that you've got access to it, but in another, if the market changes and you're left sat on it, what the hell am I going to do with it, sort of thing. So it's that trade-off, isn't it, where you have to make a best analysis and guess. And ultimately, if it's systems you've already sold, the risk is quite limited. So it makes a lot of sense. The kind of approach that we're looking towards with our scaling, if you like, is to just try and forward load these installations into the future while we're riding where we are. But that becomes really difficult because customers also won't wait. So you're kind of generating all these inquiries, and you don't want to lose them or let them slip aside. But because of the solar coaster, I want to take teams of people on either, because of that predicted nature in the industry. And I think that's the crossroads we're at the minute as we move into the mass adoption phase, that I think the warm home stuff is really going to drive. I'm quite encouraged by what we're seeing around all of that. So I think there's some huge positives there. But just to draw back again on the kit side of things and its value, I think there's a missing piece around all of this in terms of the safety side of stuff. And I've been having a few conversations with people around fire safety of solar panels and such, and how this technology can actually amplify fires that start in other places and things. And the risk scale on buildings have been adjusted because of renewables. And I raised the point in some of those conversations the other week of, what about all the fires that have never happened because of renewables, or the electrical incidents that have never happened because of renewables? It's unmeasured and it's unknown. And these gateway style systems will insulate properties from grid derived issues that could have otherwise resulted in a fire or an electrical shock in somebody's home or business premises. That's the upside that is often forgotten. I think that needs to be weighted into some of these discussions sometimes, and is another point of value and return on investment. If you get some catastrophic issue out in the grid, you're no longer exposed to it with a gateway style system. It will isolate you and insulate you from that. It could be a pen fault, it could be something else. And that resilience is beyond just keeping the power on. It can be keeping you safe as well. And as the grid infrastructure becomes more strained due to EV charge points and all this other stuff, we see the alerts in our systems all the time of a pen fault being detected in such and such a location where the charge point's shut down or the system's gone off grid. So we know it's happening, and you just wonder what would have happened maybe if that wasn't there doing what it did. We'd never know.
Yeah, and it's impossible to really measure that, because the issue didn't happen to them. So it's kind of like, if that had something had happened and it had, blown all the TV, like all the TVs and smoke alarms and all sorts of things up in the house, it's like, well, that's been saved because you've got these systems. And it might be one of those things that in 100 you get one or something like that happens. But what if you're that one where it happens to you? And the value of this stuff is more than just the pounds and pence it saves you. But it's a really difficult argument to make, because obviously people, if you're coming from it from an installer's point of view, people think you're trying to sell it like that because the numbers simply don't stack up. And for a lot of people, they do stack up. And others, they don't stack up, but they want it because they see the value in having that reassurance of a system. So it's yeah, it's a weird world to try and sell it in, but stuff like this Iran's war and the Ukraine war and God knows what else is going to happen with Cuba and all this other sort of stuff. It's like, we just don't know. In an uncertain world, it's one of the best ways, in my view, to try and protect your family because everything runs on electric, especially if you've made the decision to come off heating oil, which is basically tripled to go onto an air source heat pump. Well, then suddenly you are all electric and you really need to get some sort of protection for your property. Otherwise, maybe not this time of year we're going into, but certainly towards the winter time, you need to have something that will help that property run if we do go into blackouts or if we do go into really high pricing. Being flexible when you can buy that power, it might still be a lot more expensive than it is right now, but at least you have the flexibility to buy it when it is cheaper, the cheapest in the market. And like I said, that might be a lot higher than it is now, but at least you've got that flexibility to move and buy it when you need it rather than buy it when you want to buy it rather than when you absolutely need it, because they know they've got generations worth of data on when you need power. But they can't stop you buying it when you want to buy it on these flexible tariffs. So, yeah, it's an interesting one. But you either shared with me or you put it on a group chat about this whole warm homes plan development. So, yeah, what have you seen on that?
Yeah, there's some meat on the bones that's been floated around from government. They're kind of accelerating what they're doing. It's still not actually been pinned down, but there's been some sort of rumours shared, and I think some of them are substantiated now by some of the policy documents that the government have put out, that there'll be grants of up to around, I think it's £12,000 for people who are on a salary limit of around 35,000. So it's going to be people on benefits and low income households where that's granted and fully funded, and that the 0% finance is going to be available to people up to around a similar level to that. It just says to cover the standard installation costs of a solar PV and battery storage system. Quite where they actually define that in a monetary value, I don't know, but that's going to be available to everybody, regardless of your income status, on 0% finance, which I think is interesting, and that's going to drive it. I just wanted to share one of my experiences around the energy tariffs because you triggered it in my mind when you mentioned it. We had a really extreme event with Octopus over the weekend where they were paying people, I think it was 10 or 15p a unit. I managed to hold my install at 20 kilowatts for near enough 4 or 5 hours. There was steam coming out of my meter box at one stage, but that's the Yorkshire in me. So we were charging electric vehicles, charging the battery system up, running the dishwasher, the washing machine non-stop, tumble drying. Even though it was windy and sunny outside, we could have had the washing on the line. It's like make maximum use of it. And we managed to make, I think it was something like 16 quid in the day being paid to run the home. But that's the kind of thing that can open up to you when you have access to this stuff. I was nearly going to bring a load of battery storage systems home from A1-to-1 training, stick them on my house, fill them up and export it all later on, but decided that was too much admin for the day. But that's the kind of thing that can open up with those tariffs. And I shared a reel that seems to have triggered a lot of people because I'd said I'd saved £2,000 from my renewables kit in 1 year. And I evidenced it with data that I'd done it, but still people were saying that's not true. You can't do that. You can't even power your lights. And so some people just will not be convinced. It's like, this is my energy bill for the year before. This is what we received for the year after. The consumption figures are largely the same, and there's a £2,000 difference. What more?
Yeah.
What more can I really prove that point with? But so the savings are there for people without any doubt. And I know my system, I will get all of my money back in 8.5 years for what it costs, and that's at full installation cost that we charge for a customer as well. So it does play out in the end, and if we get more days like that last weekend, I can get the money back in about a year. But yeah, the warm homes thing, it's looking like £12,000 as a grant if you're on up to £35,000 as an income for your household, not just an individual, and then the 0% finance deals to pay for a standard kit. And they are rushing this through right now because they've obviously been spooked by what's going on in Iran, and they want to get it out there so people can use it. So they're working on the process of how that's going to happen. You know, how can people get that money? Is it paid to us as installers? Is it paid to the customers? How is that actually going to work? So I think that's the thing they're sorting out right now.
Wow, that's going to be so good. I mean, if it works as we all probably hope it works, where the money comes quick, and the entry level of it isn't really hard to access, but stringent enough that decent installs are going to be done. I'm really interested to get your point of view on whether or not you think it will drive really customers to spend more money on an install to get it done at a better quality with better kit and to get a bigger system, or if you think it will drive customers to try and get the cheapest system that is all under the £12,000 kind of value banner. So you literally they don't want to be a penny over it. Because I've been battling this in my mind, and I've got some points of view on it. But what's your initial points of view on that? Where do you think people will fall?
I think a lot of the people in that category will generally be renters. Is the short summary of my assessment, and it's maybe not as big a market as we think it would be. I do think that people who are deciding on choice of finance at that point where it's a grant are going to just be looking at spending that money and no more. I think that's kind of where they will sit. For the reality of the way they live in the cost of living crisis, they don't have access to any further funds to do that. Maybe when they're saving money through having the system in the future, they might decide to add extra kit because they've saved on their energy bills and such. But I think it very much will be at that limit, and installation companies, I'm sure, will spring up offering £12,000 bog standard systems, as you saw through the feed-in tariff era, that will be mass market sold out through Instagram ads and such. We'll see flaring up all over the place. I'm sure that will become a thing. But I was thinking about that the other day. It's like, well, how many people would actually fall into that category anyway? How many of them are homeowners? They're probably living in maybe flats or rental premises. So are they really going to be looking to get this stuff? Are the landlords going to want it on their houses, even if they can qualify for the grants? I think that's quite a complex thing. The bulk of the money does seem to be sitting in the 0% interest-free loans side of things. I think very much people will be wanting to access that, and the return on investment calculations start to look very different because of it. So you may see people say, well, actually, I was going to spend maybe, 12, 15 grand anyway, but we can bulk that up now to maybe £20,000, get those extra couple of battery modules, get the bi-directional EV charger, or maybe get some bigger panels or a larger array. I think you might see decisions like that being made in those places rather than a strategy around the entry level kit. On the
because the grant side of things, I totally understand that they're not just going to want to, give everybody a system, and so they've got to set that ceiling in terms of the household budget to try and help the ones that people that are on the lowest incomes get that. So that's fine, and to be honest, that's like the whole Eco4 work and all of that. That's never really been anywhere that as a company we've kind of sat, because we've always struggled to even win any of them jobs because it's always been quite tight on price for what they want. But I'm not against doing it, definitely not. It'd be interesting to see if we can pick up some of that, because I'd love to try and help some of these people get out of that poverty, that fuel poverty kind of banner, because it would just be so rewarding to do that. And I think there's a genuine business opportunity there as well. So it's kind of a double benefit. In terms of the finance side, I think I've not seen, apart from your screenshot, or your message on that. Did they give any sort of idea as to the limit of household income for the 0%?
Unlimited is what it said. So it didn't matter what your financial circumstances were. It was available up to a value of an atypical kit. So I don't think you can have a 0% deal if you live in a great big house for some 30 grand system. It will be set at this 12, 15,000, wherever it ends up
being.
I
think is fair. I think is fair. Wherever that is, because you've got to have a blanket kind of thing. So because why should someone that's got a massive property that's going to get a 35 grand system get that at 0% finance, whereas someone that's on a smaller system that's got a smaller property can only get £12,000 of So there's got to be some sort of rules there, and I get that. I think what's been buzzing around my head with this is kind of like, well, if I was a homeowner, I'm like looking at this thing and I'm going, well, I'd love, like, I've just been to a job today, and this family they've got 3 kids. They're older kids now, but they've got 3 kids. They're using 9,000 kilowatt hours a year, which is about 25 kilowatt hours a day. And their roof there's just no real decent roofs. It's heavily shaded. There's one on the garage that like we can maybe get £10 on the garage. But I know they're going to be looking at like probably because we're trying to get them to get a big battery to load shift. And so, but they're obviously conscious of cost. And I'm like, look, this is going to make a massive difference to this family if we can get panels on that garage, batteries in the garage, but the cable run is a nightmare. It's got to come right from the other side of this house, under a driveway. It's going to be a chunky job. It's going to be a 20 grand job, easily, maybe 25. They don't know that yet. but looking at that, thinking, well, if that cost becomes a barrier, then they're gonna kind of try and shrink that system. We're still gonna have to do the trench, we still have to do the cable run, we still have to do all this. We have to install the kit. They're just not quite squeezing all of that juice out of the install because there may be 1 or 2 battery modules away from really making a massive difference. So part of my thinking was, right, well, let's just say for easy maths, let's say it's going to be 24 grand this install. If they can get 50% of that at 0% finance, suddenly they're looking at an upfront, it depends how all this stuff works, but, theorising this, they're looking at an upfront cost of 12 grand for a 24 grand system. And suddenly, if you've got a property that is on 9,000 kilowatt hours a year, and if we're able to, massively impact on the cost of those 9,000 kilowatt hours a year, then suddenly that monthly cost that they pay to whoever for this 0% finance is getting swallowed by the savings. So they're paying the system off with their savings. So it's kind of like, actually, does that mean that instead of getting a system that is maybe a bit too small for them at this point and really stretching the finances to try and push for that, it actually makes them go, oh, it's no brainer now because we're getting half of it at 0% VAT. And so I'm like, well, that's a bit more of an extreme case. But if you had a property where they're literally they're not sure if just to go for that better standard battery system, better standard panels, or that bigger array, or the panels on the extra roof, will it unlock people to actually go, you know what, I'm going to choose that installer because they're a couple of grand more expensive, but when I divide that couple of grand up over whatever the term of this 0% finance is, 10 years or 15 years, whatever it ends up being, is it going to, like, that extra couple of £100 a year or, £1,000 a year that it is it actually I'm going to get the benefit of knowing that my installer is of a really high quality? So is it going to be different than just handing out money because people are still going to have to pay it back, so they have to get into the mindset of they're still going to pay that money, it's just going to split it up over a period of time. So I've maybe been too optimistic with hoping that people choose better kit, bigger kit, and from a better installer. But yeah, I'm kind of thinking, I wonder if it'll just push people to go for a better kit that's bigger and is going to be really good for their property. And yeah, fingers crossed on that.
I think it was nice to see that the policy outline was looking at a reasonable figure. I fully expected them to come forward with like
£5 grand.
£5 grand or something.
Yeah.
And, it was, 12, 15,000 is a realistic amount for most people to be able to get a battery 100%. Of some description and some solar panels.
Yeah.
Not everybody needs to have 25 grand systems on the houses. No. In the premium side of stuff that we fit in our day-to-day job, that isn't the mass market. And like you say, it'd be really nice for us to be able to access that space and provide for those people who can't currently afford that stuff. And if the grants and 0% swing them over the edge with that, I think that is a good thing. I think you will see people make smarter decisions maybe when they're not just looking to draw down on their savings to buy this stuff, or they're looking to finance with credit cards or other loans where they've got that interest payment. And this is one thing I think the government will get right, because they've got experience of doing this sort of thing through the era of COVID with their COVID-backed loans for businesses. They rolled those out at scale, and from all intents and purposes, I think they did end up recovering most of the costs behind that, even though some businesses folded and never paid the money back overall with the interest charges around it. It's been a net effect of no real issue for them. I think that they're looking at a similar sort of process with that, where it's going to sit with the retail banks, which is probably going to be a good thing, so then the consumers can access it to then deal with us as installers. I was wondering if it would be a bit like the buzz grants with the heat pumps, where it's paid to the installer through application, or the EV grants. It doesn't look like that's going to be the case for the 0% finance stuff. I think it will be for the grants. I think that will come through a similar process.
Yeah, I think you're right on that. And I suppose looking at it from the government's point of view, it's almost like an infrastructure investment, isn't it? Because if you can get, the population to effectively invest their own money in their own home energy system, but a home energy system that nowadays most of them can do some sort of grid trading and grid support side of things, it kind of stimulates like a secondary benefit to them potentially, where they're actually backing up some of these areas that have struggled for capacity and struggled for connections with air source heat pumps becoming more popular, with EV charging becoming more popular. They're almost like saying, yeah, you guys invest your money, we'll give you it at 0%, but you still pay for it. Invest your money in all of this stuff, and then, by chance, you might decide you want to help support the grid. as a secondary benefit, and obviously be paid to do that. So I really hope they get it right. I hope the DNOs can keep up with it. I think the DNOs have got a lot to try and improve on in terms of speed of reply, quality of reply, and investment in the infrastructure to allow more people to have this stuff. Because wouldn't it be horrible if we had all these inquiries, all these people going to get all this money to do it, and the DNOs just went, no, you can't have that.
Computer says no.
You can't have that now. And almost, because Northern Power Grid have been a bit tricky in this area in terms of speed of reply and everything else like that. And I know some of the other DNOs have been even faster. So it's kind of like, hopefully it doesn't hold people back in a specific area just because a DNO has been a little bit slower reply or a little bit more worried about the network. There's probably genuine reasons for it, but it's one of them where hopefully it doesn't penalise local installers in say Northern Power Grid or wherever people are having trouble from, all these little IDNOs that are independent, to actually sell these systems to their customer base. Because that would be annoying if we saw all these people in national grid territory absolutely smashing the installs in, and then where we're in 44 days to get told that you can only have a 0.95 a kilowatt export like I've had on one of my jobs. I hope the DNOs managed to kind of ramp things up a little bit as well.
Yeah, dirt with Northern Power Grid at the minute. That's a bugbear of all of ours, I think, in that area. But yeah, you're dead right. I think there's some work that needs to be done maybe around the G98 because it's very much outdated of its time now. Maybe that needs to be looked at, and an export limit of 5 kilowatt and maybe an inverter size of 6 kilowatt that is just accepted as a standard. I think a workable level is needed in that space because 3.68, it'd be interesting to know how many actual G98s go through anymore. Probably not very many, I would suspect. And if that is the case, then it's not really fit for its purpose, is it? So maybe that should be looked at. So we know as installers, okay, we can have a 6 kilowatt inverter as an example as a minimum, and we can have 5 kilowatts as export as a minimum. That's a sensible amount to go back to most consumers with, and in these kind of times. So I think that's something that would be really helpful to drive the market forward a little bit. And in terms of kind of customer expectations on lead times as well, because that can be a frustrating aspect for them when they are being told. We tell them at the minute it's 45 working days, not days with Northern Power Grid. They don't deal in just days. So you've got that kind of issue and conversation as well. And that can be the difference sometimes with them going ahead or not. So that is a big piece that needs to be done. And the infrastructure costs, another great point you've just made there, that at the minute, a lot of these costs at the grid side of things are sitting in the hands of taxpayers and bill payers. If we want to upgrade local networks for residential connections or even the grid scale stuff that we're seeing come online with these huge solar arrays and wind farms, that all needs investment. It's paid for by us as taxpayers or bill payers. So we're still paying for it in a roundabout way. The government are kind of moving that cost a little bit with this warm home stuff potentially into the world of putting it where it's needed. So it goes onto those business roofs and the house roofs, and we're generating where we need it. Some of the infrastructure costs around that are then not required. Like you've said, we're not drawing as much out of the wider grid as a result. It's been generated locally and used locally. And then with the battery side alongside that, you can become more resilient to grid events as well. So I think it makes a lot of sense. There is some joined up thinking there, and maybe should have got here a little bit sooner than we have done. Because I think there's been big investment at grid scale, and some of the curtailment that's needed around that is why we see energy retailers paying people like me 15 pence a unit to have 20 kilowatts steaming out their meter box here and there to stop them having to pay wind farms to shut down. That's when it's really windy, and they're obviously having to pay a lot of money to lock these down. Maybe I guess that's why they had the cash to chuck around to the likes of me. But yeah, I think that is something that it needs to be evaluated, and I'm sure the government have looked at that, and they probably realise it's not going to cost as much money as people think. Where there's this 15-20 billion pound figure, they're probably saving 15-20 billion pounds somewhere else from not having to upgrade the wider grid infrastructure.
Yeah, and you look at they've already been talking about packages to help people during these crises over the energy prices going up, and a bit like the whole COVID furlough thing, and it just cost them so much money, and they've already been talking about it being more targeted. But if you can get, I class myself as being like a middle income. I'm certainly not on the poverty side of things. I'm certainly not on the real rich side of things. I'm kind of sat there in the middle. And I think a lot of the time, the richest people in society have the money to be able to just pay the bill. They're not, they may be too busy doing other things to really drill down into looking at their bills and going, bloody hell, that's costing me a lot. Some of them do, and I've worked for quite a lot of people that do that that could easily afford for the rest of their lives just to pay whatever the bill was, but they're looking at that. So I'm not tarnishing them all with the same brush, but when you are sat in the middle side of things, where you do, you can scrape the money together to pay that bill, but it would mean a lot more for you to actually be able to impact that bill directly with something like solar and battery. I think that's a big chunk of society. If you can help them take control of their own solar, their own energy through solar and through batteries, certainly for a good chunk of the year, obviously winter time is a little bit more tricky, then that's probably money that the government is saving by not having to try and help the middle bit of society as much through direct kind of bill support. They're always going to have to try and support the people on the lowest incomes, and part of that maybe through this warm homes thing, when we actually see the final thing in action, and helping those people generate their own power and their own batteries. I think it's fantastic, and I'd love to see that happen. But they're still probably going to have to help them a little bit with energy prices in and around the poorer times of year. But I think if you can help that the middle of society that maybe would just about scrape together the money to buy one of these systems outright, if you can help them buy it as cheap as possible through finance, and reduce that capital expenditure of 12, 15, 20, 25 grand, then I think you'd unlock this really big middle band in the country to actually take control of their own power. The rich side of things can kind of decide on their own to do what they need to do. And if they get a 12 grand 0% interest loan, then they're not getting money for free, as in not being given money. They are technically getting money for free, but they're not given the money never to pay back. They are going to pay it back. So it doesn't necessarily have to be as means tested there, because effectively they're still going to repay that money. But it kind of opens everything up to kind of go, well, the middle society and the top of society in terms of the financial side of things, it will unlock them to take control of their own power. We can help the lowest in society, financially in society, to unlock their own energy independence, and it probably eases that burden on the government side, where they're having to every single year, as energy prices go up and up and up, and they're having to spend more and more and more to support people. They're saving money. They're kind of putting a stopper on that, because suddenly people are a lot more energy independent.
Yeah, 100%. That's a great shout. I think that is how it will hopefully play out. We shall see. And I'll link in the description to the article that I did find. I think it was the
newspaper.
I think the Telegraph have run it as well. Okay. So there's a few other reports on it now, and the government are pushing this at pace. I think that's the good thing, to get the message out around that, because we've all seen them come forward with policy and then take a couple of years to actually do anything with it. I think that's not going to be the case with this, and we're seeing the same with the balcony solar stuff. They are not messing about. They're even upsetting our regulation writers, saying that I don't care what's in that book. These are coming to the little middle island Amazon, whether you like it or not. Deal with it. You're going to have to adapt to what you're doing. And there's a big safety conversation around that. But, that's the way the world works. When economic pressures and global events take precedent over safety. That is another topic in and of itself. But that's coming too. The balcony solar stuff's going to be out and available for us to buy imminently, and that's a whole other range of access to people who maybe wouldn't be able to get this stuff. We went into that in depth in the van, didn't we, when we had that conversation? If you're talking 400-500 quid for a little 600 to 800 watt system, in the grand scheme of things for one individual household, it's not going to have that much of an impact. But if you've got this on balconies all over London and Manchester and Leeds and all the rest of it, that all will play a part in to help support the grid and keep those bills maybe a bit more under control as well.
Yeah. I've I put a big put a bit of a rant on my social media, which we spoke about in the van, and I think maybe the way that I did that rant was maybe slightly unclear as to why I was ranting about it, to a degree where I think people thought that I felt like it was going to take money out of my company. I think it's quite the opposite. I think it'll almost let people test having a solar PV system before they buy a full proper system. So I don't think it's a negative in terms of generating business. I think it'll help. I'm very, very concerned that in a click of the fingers, they can kind of disregard all the stuff that us as electricians have had to try and get over in terms of safety, and looking at adding new consumer units, changing consumer units, doing all this sort of stuff to get the right protected devices in there, for something them to go, don't worry about all that.
Just plug it in.
Just plug it. Just, you know what we've got? We've got sockets around the house. Let's just plug them in. You've got a 4-gang extension lead. Yeah, just plug 4 in, then that'll be fine. Just plug 4 in. All that sort of stuff is kind of is kind of removed very quickly when these sorts of economic pressures happen. So I was more peed off about that, to be honest, more than kind of feeling like it was going to take food out of the company's mouth. I think it'll help, to be honest, in terms of uptake. But yeah, time will tell. It might have zero uptake, and it was all a big hoo-ha about nothing, or it might be the next big thing. That's another little climb. I can just see it, Mac, in the distance of my carriage now. I can just see it coming over my little hump that we're going on. I can see it in the distance. So I'm sure we'll see more of that as we go through this year.
Yeah, I think we're at the mass adoption phase now as all this is coming together. So we're going to see it one way or another if we like it or not. And you're dead right to raise that issue around safety. It's nothing at all to do with worried about market share being taken away from actual solar systems of their traditional sense. It is that worry of safety. It only takes one of these to go wrong for it to hit the news, like the e-scooter side of stuff, and that just puts everybody off wanting the technology as a whole. I think I have to be really careful with that, and hopefully the retailers are getting some good quality kit into the middle aisle and onto Amazon, and not some shonky rubbish that's going to be burning flats down all over the country.
Parkside solar and battery.
Oh God, yeah, we'll wait and see what happens. Hopefully it's some good quality stuff that is fit for purpose. But yeah, we'll see. I think we've given that a good run through. We're down to like 8% on the cameras, so
we better wrap
we're
it
going
up.
to have to wrap this one up. And as Sam brought us in so well, I'll try and take us out just as good by mentioning the installer show again. So if you aren't already, get yourself registered. I'll drop a link in the description where you can go off and do that and come and see us. Come and have a conversation on the stand if you've got a point of view about this or anything else. We'll be recording stuff through the duration of that event, and it'd be great to feature you in some of those conversations as well. And as always, if we've got the time and inclination, and we have a little subscription over on Spotify, which helps us run the podcast. It's a couple of quid a month, and it's great to see more of you signing up to that every week. Otherwise, just giving us a share or thumbs up or wherever you're watching this really helps the podcast grow as well. And we thank you for watching as always. We'll see you on the next one.